Mr Speaker, I seek leave to move a motion, and the motion is that this House censures the Prime Minister for presiding over a government that is paralysed by dysfunction and division and is now incapable of addressing the daily challenges facing the Australian people, and secondly, for the culture of evasion, deceit and sheer incompetence that characterises her Prime Ministership.
Is leave granted?
Well, in that event, Mr Speaker, I move.
Leave is not granted. The Manager of Opposition Business is now given the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And in that event, I move that so much of standing and sessional orders be suspended as would prevent the Manager of Opposition Business from moving the following motion forthwith: that this House censures the Prime Minister for presiding over a government that is paralysed by dysfunction and division and is now incapable of addressing the daily challenges facing the Australian people, and secondly, for the culture of evasion, deceit and sheer incompetence that characterises her Prime Ministership. Mr Speaker, standing orders should be suspended and a motion of censure of the Prime Minister should be debated, as this Prime Minister has already been given every opportunity to end the evasion, shiftiness and malevolence and start the truth-telling she so often talks about. And in spite of being given the opportunity, Mr Speaker, to do just that, the Prime Minister again has scurried from the chamber into the Chief Whip's of the government's office for her afternoon cup of tea and mint slice, because she can't bear to stay in the chamber and face the truth that her government is in tatters, her reputation is falling apart, her alibi is crumbling.
Return to the substance of the motion, which is a motion to suspend. And the member won't talk while I'm talking. It's a motion to suspend standing and sessional orders, and the honourable member will direct his attention to what he has moved. The member has the call.
And that is why, Mr Speaker, this matter should take precedence over all other business on the agenda today. Standing orders must be suspended to give this matter precedence, because the people have waited to find out when the evasion ends and the truth-telling begins. And the answer we can give them is never. The Prime Minister is like a bug in a web who twists and turns to break free from the web in which it is ensnared. But eventually it proves incapable of doing so and simply expires. The words of Oliver Cromwell apply as much to this government today as they did when he said them to another parliament.
He no longer has the call. The Leader of the House.
6 times, yes, sir.
The Leader of the House has a point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. Well, I ask you to bring the Manager of Opposition Business back to order, as I was on 6 occasions yesterday.
It's up to me to enforce the standing orders, and I try to enforce them without fear or favour. The Manager of Opposition Business will direct himself to the substance of the motion that he has moved.
Right.
He does some of the time, and then he deviates somewhat. So he will return to the motion.
That is right, Mr Speaker. You are correct. And the reason why precedence should be given to this motion, I'm explaining why this motion is more important than any other business before the House, is because, in the words of Oliver Cromwell 359 years ago, which apply as much to this government today as they then did, you have sat here too long for any good you have been doing. Depart and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go. And that is what the Australian people want this government to do. Go. The proposed censure motion is the most pressing matter to put before the House, and for that reason standing orders must be suspended to facilitate this debate, because this Prime Minister has traduced and debased the office. She should no longer be tolerated by her party. The Prime Minister came to the office steeped in deceit. Laurie Oakes first exposed it at the National Press Club the week before the election, when he asked her if it was true that she had done a deal with the former Prime Minister to leave him in office while her henchmen rounded up the numbers. We had the pitiful story of the Leader of the House going around to the Prime Minister's office and saying, breaking in to the room where the Foreign Minister, now Foreign Minister, and the Prime Minister were sitting, and saying, "She's doing you over. Don't you know what's going on?" And the poor former Prime Minister saying to the Leader of the House, "Don't worry, mate, we've done a deal, it's all right." And him saying, "Nope, she's doing you in." And this week, the reason why standing orders should be suspended and this matter should be given precedence is because the information continues to roll out about the dysfunction and the division at the centre of this government, and the soft underbelly of the Prime Minister's alibis and her stories about how she came to leadership were exposed dramatically on the Four Corners program on Monday night. We now know that her office was drafting a victory speech 2 weeks before the day. We know that the ambassador to the United States was called in by the Secretary of State 2 weeks before the event to ask if things would change under a new leadership. And we know that the Prime Minister, in the 2 weeks before she became the Prime Minister, was using secret UMR polling to convince her colleagues that the leadership should be changed. But incredibly, we are supposed to believe that on the day of the challenge, this all came as a complete surprise to the Prime Minister. Standing orders should be suspended and this matter should be given precedence, because the Prime Minister gained her office through disloyalty and deceit, and she is going to lose it the same way. The Prime Minister presides over 3 Labor parties: the Gillard Party, the Rudd Party and the Anyone Else Party. And whomever emerges as leader, the blood feud will not end. We know this week the Minister for Trade has been visiting office after office with a list of numbers, trying to show members that the Minister for Foreign Affairs has no more than 30 votes on behalf of Bill Ludwig, the union leader from Queensland. The Rudd camp, of course, have been calling him the equivalent of Comical Ali from the days of the Iraq War. So dysfunctional are they, Mr Speaker, that standing orders should be suspended and this motion should be given precedence, so the Prime Minister can defend herself from the charge that her leadership was infected from the beginning, and that, like dealing with a gangrenous wound, the Labor Party is now moving to excise the sick limb. This is the Prime Minister who has built her leadership on deceit and deception. The Citizens' Assembly, gambling reform, means testing the private health insurance rebate, the East Timor Processing Centre, hospital reform, cash for clunkers, the open and transparent government, and the jackpot of all of them, there'll be no carbon tax under a government I lead. So, of course, this matter should be given precedence over all matters on the agenda today. Standing orders should be suspended because the full hideousness of how much the Prime Minister has debauched her office can be seen in her handling of the controversy surrounding the member for Dobell and the cover-up of the role of her office in the Australia Day riots. In both matters, she's been evasive, shifty and malevolent, to use the words of John McTiernan, her new head of communications, the 3 things he said she should not be. The Prime Minister has been asked 36 questions about the Fair Work Australia investigation and 18 questions about the role of her office in the Australia Day riot. It is a matter of record, Mr Speaker, that she has answered none of them, and that is why precedence should be given to the standing orders motion.
However, this is a motion to suspend standing and sessional orders, and it's a motion to suspend, not a motion of censure. So the manager of opposition business will therefore withdraw the accusation he made of the Prime Minister that she was steeped in deceit. That is disorderly.
Mr Speaker, I withdraw, Mr Speaker, and I thank you for your guidance. And standing orders should be suspended because this matter—
And also malevolent will have to be withdrawn.
I withdraw malevolent, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the reason why this motion should be given precedence is because the office of Prime Ministership is the most important office in politics in Australia. It is the most important office, and it has been debased by this Prime Minister's handling of the Craig Thompson affair, and it has been debased by her handling of her role, the role of her office in the Australia Day riots. The caucus, the parliament and the people know that this Prime Minister is simply swinging in the breeze, and that the member for Griffith is waiting for his time to cut her down. And the Australian people deserve better than that, Mr Speaker. The Australian people deserve a good and honest government, and that is why this matter should be given precedence. The suspension of standing orders should be given precedence because nothing is more important than debating the honesty and the integrity of the Prime Minister. In terms of the Australia Day riots, Mr Speaker, let me finish with this, let me conclude. Yesterday the Prime Minister spoke honeyed words in this place about the good intentions and commitment when it came to the looking after Indigenous people in the Closing the Gap report. So how could her office so maliciously and amorally, be prepared to manufacture a riot among the Aboriginal people at the Aboriginal Tent Embassy protest. Even the Aboriginal Tent Embassy protesters themselves have described their feelings of being used to gain political mileage. On the one hand, the Prime Minister clothed herself in the good intentions to address Indigenous disadvantage. On the other, her office conspired to use the Tent Embassy protesters to gain political mileage against the Leader of the Opposition. They stand condemned, and the Prime Minister has at no point dealt with this matter or the matter to do with Fair Work Australia. The Prime Ministership is in tattered, debased and traduced.
The honourable member's time has expired.